as a physician is first do no harm, which might be a bit of an exaggeration, frankly, but it still is an important consideration. When we deal with humans, we're dealing with human lives, we're dealing with fathers, mothers, people who have families with obviously enormous implications. And so I think as a field, we should be extremely careful about what we recommend and what we don't recommend.
Welcome to the Longevity Code, a podcast by Longevity Center Switzerland. I will be your host today. My name is Erat, and I am absolutely thrilled to interview a legend in the field of longevity, Professor Dr. Erik Verdin, who's also the CEO of Buck Institute for Aging. Welcome, Erik. It's such a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for joining.
Good to be here, Anna. I'm looking forward to this.
It's great. I mean, we saw each other in person in December, but I'm very happy to do it virtually today, and then hopefully we'll see each other again in Zurich in June or July. Really, really looking forward. So, Erik, you have such a long experience in the field of research on aging and on longevity. What made you in the first place, venture into that field?
It's an interesting story because it's one that I think reflects the sort of the academic world in a way that I was working on HIV and for many years on the transcriptional regulation of HIV. And through that work, we ended up cloning a new family of genes and the proteins that they encode. And completely independently, it turns out that others, Lenny Garante and colleagues at MIT, had discovered that they were involved in aging in yeast. And so we basically decided to, our HIV work was somewhat sort of winding down, and I was looking for a new exciting field to start working on. And so we started really asking questions as to the role of these genes and the proteins they encode in mammalian aging. And very quickly, we found out that they were actually key regulators. And so that was one aspect. The second aspect is I was getting older. And I thought, as a field of research, aging at the time, this was like late 90s, was really emerging as a completely new biology. And one that you could study using the tools of molecular genetics and molecular biology that we use in the lab. And I think the combination of really launching into a brand new field and having actually a tool, a handle to actually study it, just became irresistible. And over the last 20 years, I've progressively shut down almost all of our HIV efforts to focus exclusively on aging. And of course, one of the unique things that happened also that was an incredible opportunity for me was about 7 years ago, I was offered to lead the Buck Institute for research on aging here in Northern California. And so this gave me not only the ability to influence the field as a scientist that studies aging, but also as a leader and a voice in somewhat one of the voices for the field itself. So it's these three factors that really have led us to where we are today, and could not have more fun than what I'm having now, to be honest.
It's super to hear, and I was there in December, and me and our team was so impressed. It's really fascinating to see what you built. What made you, or what is the history of Buck? Can you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the 90s, starting around 1990 and until 2000, there was an amazing change that happened in the field of the study of aging. Aging until then was considered sort of, I'll use a technical term called entropy, which is disorder. It's a physics term that means that all nature tends to go through the biggest disorder, and life is an anomaly in this respect. But aging was thought to be just the accumulation of disorder in an organism. And if you think about it from that standpoint, not very much that you can do. What happened in the 90s is the identification of a whole series of genes and proteins that actually regulate the rate of aging. And what these factors do is the cause for the disorder is the air we breathe, oxygen, it's some of the nutrients that we ingest, it's UV irradiation, gamma radiation, all of this causes damage in our organism. And what had not been appreciated, at least not to the degree that we think is important today, is the fact that we are sort of gifted with a whole series of repair mechanisms that allow us to mitigate the damage caused by all of these insults that our bodies are subjected to. And so studying these repair mechanisms is essentially what has led us to where we are today, where we can really look at aging as a variable that we can actually not only control, but hopefully in some time revert. And so the Buck Institute was founded in 1999, right on the heels of all these discoveries that really showed that we could actually study aging and we could do something about it. And we were started with a gift from Mrs. Buck, who left a sizable endowment that we still benefit from. And the vision was to create an institute that was going to not only study the basic molecular of aging, which we have done for the last 20 years, but also take the lead in driving novel interventions in medicine and in the clinic. And this is really what I was hired for to do, is to really take all of the basic knowledge on the biology of aging and try to see how much of it and how should it be applied to humans to alter the way we think about aging. Obviously, that the goal is primarily to a healthy age, to enhance a healthy aging. We don't think, by the way, I'm somewhat, I'm sorry, I have my dog barking in the background.
What kind of dog do you have? I'm just curious.
I have a yellow lab.
Oh, and he's healthy.
She is wonderful. She has a mind of her own.
Because in the field of longevity, there is quite a lot of interest also in pets.
Absolutely. Unconditional love is what we all need more of.
I couldn't agree more. Well, but getting back to your origins and why you started at the Buck. We of course here in Switzerland and in the Longevity Center of Switzerland, we are so honored and also thankful that we can work with scientists like you, because the field of longevity is developing so quickly, and what we want to do is be on the forefront, but at the same time work in the most evidence-based fashion that we can. And the only way to do that is, of course, to have a great exchange with scientists and people like you and your entire, or all the teams that you work with at the Buck Institute. I'm just wondering, because a lot of voices are saying that longevity is kind of a mega trend and it's not very evidence-based. What do you have to say about that in terms of evidence-based longevity medicine?
Yeah, that's it's a pet peeve of mine. So it's a topic that I'm very deeply concerned about, is the fact that the science of longevity exists, and we can do things in animal models in a laboratory setting that I frankly never would have dreamt of. We have identified medicines, mutations, interventions that really significantly impact the way our animals are aging in the laboratory setting. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of my goals is really to bring this to humans. But I also come from an old school of tradition that means that, as a physician, is first do no harm, which might be a bit of an exaggeration, frankly, but it still is an important consideration. When we deal with humans, we're dealing with human lives, we're dealing with fathers, mothers, people who have families, with obviously enormous implications. And so I think as a field, we should be extremely careful about what we recommend and what we don't recommend. And there is a enormous enthusiasm in the field. There is an enormous proliferation of novel interventions, supplements, drugs, and hypotheses that really are generating the excitement that you talked about. This is a mega trend. There's no doubt about it. Living healthier longer is one of the deepest human aspirations. And I've said many times, you can be as wealthy as you want. If you don't have any health, you will not be able to enjoy the fruit of your hard work. So there is a huge human aspiration to be healthy and to live as healthy as long as possible. That being said, because of the enthusiasm and frankly, because of some fringe actors, there is sometimes a little too much enthusiasm, and sometimes things are being recommended that I think we're not ready to document or to prove. And so my point is that as a field, we should apply the same rigorous standards that have been applied to the field of medicine so far when we make recommendations. And so the stance that the Buck Institute takes is really to conduct clinical trials and to actually document and prove that whatever we recommend is actually not only efficacious, but also safe. And frankly, I get nervous sometimes by I'm approached by 20-year-olds who are asking me, should I be on metformin or should I be on rapamycin? And, that obviously is a bridge too far for me. I think we should proceed with caution and really study, so that we're right at that stage in the field where it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of investment, a lot of, government support, a lot of donor support to really allow us to test all of these hypotheses that we have and to finally get to a point where we can actually tell someone in the clinic, this is what we should do. Now, what I'm saying is that it should not detract you from the fact that we already know a lot. The problem is that right now what we know is mostly based on lifestyle factors, and which are enormous in terms of a healthy lifespan. And I hope we'll have a chance to talk about this in the future. But there are other things coming on the horizon that are going to be even more powerful than lifestyle interventions. So my advice to your listeners is, use whatever we know is efficacious and safe right now. Resist the temptation to embark in risky, unknown, unproven therapies, and allow us another 5, 10, 20 years to really identify in a rigorous manner what actually works and what doesn't work. And I'm convinced that within the next 10 years, we'll have a drug that will slow down the aging process in humans. We don't have that yet. We have lifestyle intervention that we know do this, but no drugs yet. And frankly, I think it's going to be a combination of all of these variables. So I've taken a stance which some people have argued is too conservative, but as a physician and a scientist, I think I know exactly what we can offer, and I think my stance has been that we should underpromise and overdeliver. But that being said, I'm as enthusiastic as everybody else in the field in terms of what we're going to be able to do.
I want to get back to that in a second. But when we already talk about aging, there are, since about 10 years, with Horvath and his team publishing the first epigenetic or the biological kind of clock. What do you think when we talk about, so not talking about interventions, but really just about measuring the biological age. What can you say about these diagnostics and these clocks? How reliable are they?
I can say a lot. We do work a lot on the clocks. So just a word of introduction, these clocks are measuring some variables, be there epigenetic marks, DNA methylation, or some new clocks are measuring metabolites, some clocks are using facial recognition, some clocks are using the way you're walking, some clocks are using all kinds of variables. So we can generate all kinds of clocks. All of us also have the ability, because of our brain that works as a computer, to actually pretty much guess someone's age. And we, if you meet someone within 5 minutes, you'll be able to probably to guess their age plus or minus 5 years. This is your mind using its own internal clocks to devise someone's age. Now, the important thing to realize is that we all have two ages. We have a chronological age, which is how old you are, and you can decide this based on the calendar. But we also have a biological age, and it turns out that we all age at different rates. Some of us will die at 60, some of us at 80, and some at 100. And it turns out that when you look at someone, you can probably guess their age, and sometimes you will be off. That person will either look older than their chronological age, or they will look younger. So this is what we define as the biological age. This is what the clocks are measuring. They are estimating where you are in your trajectory. Actually, do you look younger than someone your age, or do you look older? Now, the important thing to realize is these clocks are research tools. They are not clinical tools. Most of them have not been validated in the clinic. And so again, as another example of the field sometimes going faster than it should, some companies have been commercializing these clocks. And so I get calls and emails nonstop about people. I just got one this morning from someone who told me, well, I measured all my clocks and they tell me that I'm 5 years older. What does that mean? Well, the first question I would ask is, which clock? Because it turns out that these clocks actually will not tell you the same age, all of them. So I did an experiment, very simple. I took my DNA and I sent it to a laboratory, and they measured all of my clocks. And my age varied from 22, my biological age varied from 22 to 67, which is actually my true chronological age. And they were all over the place. One 22, as I said, which was a bit ridiculous. Another one 45, 52, 65, and actually the last one is 67. So when you see this, I'm able to interpret these clocks because we all are really looking at different aspects of biology. But frankly, for the general public, I would argue that these tools are not ready. They're gimmicks. They're cute. They sell products for whoever wants to make money selling them, but they are not ready for prime time. And there are longevity clinic as yours are obviously using these tools, but they have the knowledge and a better understanding of what they truly mean. So I think this is the state at which we are. But that being said, I don't want to detract from the whole field of biomarkers of aging, because obviously you cannot change something that you cannot measure. And so the idea of having these clocks is to have tools, mostly at this point for the research environment. Let's say you identify a drug that you think will increase aging, will decrease aging in humans. How are you going to test this? Obviously, no one is considering doing a 50-year study to try to see if your drug is working. So the idea is that we will use these biomarkers as surrogate markers that will allow us to estimate in a much shorter time, how well someone is responding and what is the prediction in terms of their future health. So that's really where we are at this point. If you do the clocks, obviously they have to be taken with a grain of salt. If all of your clocks are pointing in the wrong direction, meaning they all tell you that you're older than what you are actually, that would be a source of concern for me. If they all look younger, I think that would be a source of joy in the other directions. But each number itself has relatively little value, frankly.
Yeah. Well, as a scientist and medical doctor, I like to triangulate methods. So we use all kinds of methods and all kinds of biomarkers so that we then get kind of a realistic picture of your health and where you're standing. And I fully agree with you. Just doing one biological clock will not really get you very far. But triangulating the methods and using various methods can really, really give you a nice baseline that you can then use whenever you implement certain training programs and certain regimes, and then you can see how you're developing and seeing how the baseline, your body is changing in comparison to the baseline. And so I fully agree with you on that. And what's also interesting is that many of these epigenetic clocks, they are of course measuring the methylation of the CPG islets or snippets, and And in mammals, in general, I believe about 80, even more than 80% are already methylated. So how to then determine how much more is through aging is then being methylated is not always very easy. But when you use various methods and triangulate these methods, I think you can get a really nice baseline, and that's what we are trying to do here at the Longevity Center in Zurich.
I agree, and if you another analogy is that, if you are a physician and you look at a patient walking into your clinic, you will certainly usually measure their blood sugar, but you're not going to derive a whole theory about how these people are aging based on a single blood sugar. You will measure it repeatedly, and you will measure their blood pressure. You will measure their blood cells. You will measure a whole series of variables, and the same should be about these clocks. I think right now there's a lot of focus on Horvath clock, the methylation clocks, but I can tell you that on the horizon there's a whole series of new clocks that will come that I believe will have more link to biology, because the truth of the matter is, when we think about epigenetic clocks, we have no idea what they're measuring. We know we're measuring the state of methylations, but these are really small differences, and we don't know how this is actually the biology of aging. So I think this is an active area of investigation, and one that I see will increase the tools that physicians have to assess the health of someone at any given time. And really, the other thing that should be noted is that there was a paper that came out yesterday actually showing that if you are measuring the clock at different times of the day, it changes by as much as 5 years. So
really? Really?
Yes. And so this is a variable that we were not aware of. And of course, if for some reason a patient comes on one day, measures in the morning, has blood drawn in the morning, and then 3 months later comes back in the afternoon, their age might be different by 2 to 5 years. So again, it's a reflection of these are early tools. We need to do a lot more work. But I think it should not diminish the enthusiasm that we have from what they're actually going to bring to the clinic, which is really a way of assessing health in a way that we've never done before.
I fully agree with you. And what's really also interesting is that I think this was published in September last year in Nature, that many of us have organs that age at a completely different rate. So your heart might be, in your case, maybe 40 years. But then your prostate might be 50, and it's really fascinating that you can really see how various organs age completely in a different fashion and rate. And this is, of course, hugely important when we try to optimize our clients' and patients' health.
I agree.
By 2050, I believe that about 2 billion people will be more or less 60 or over 60 years of age. And so clearly we need to look at how to keep elder people on a global level also healthy and optimize health and optimize the health of the workforce, because also the workforce is getting older because of these demographic changes. But there are also some ethical considerations here. What how do you see it when we're trying to keep people healthy and fit until, let's say, 90 or 100, and really increase the health span so that they are healthy until the end of life? Do you see an ethical problem, or do you see an ethical problem if you would not be doing that?
I was driving in San Francisco yesterday, and it was on the side of a building. There was a huge graffiti that said health is a human right.
Which it is.
Which I think it is.
It is.
Everyone thinks about us as trying to increase longevity. I think longevity is going to be a byproduct of something else, which is health. And I think our true focus is on this. If you look at what happens today, so we in the last 150 years, our lifespan has gone from around 37. In 1850, it was 37. To about 77 to 80, depending on what country you live in the Western world. So we have doubled our life expectancy. I mean, if you think about it, this is an incredible gift that we are all benefiting from, especially me, as I'm getting, closer to the end. I'm cognizant of this every single day. This life is just wonderful, and to be able to function, to work, and to work at a high level while being older is an incredible gift. And to enjoy I just became a grandfather for the first time, which was actually pretty amazing.
Congratulations!
To see your children grow, to see your great-grandchildren, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all of this is the essence of human life, and we all want more of it. The reality on the ground is somewhat different in a way that along with this increase in life expectancy, we've seen an increase in a whole series of diseases that we did not really know about before. And I'll mention them: heart attack, strokes, type 2 diabetes, many forms of cancer, Alzheimer's disease, macular degeneration, osteoarthritis, hip fracture. The list goes on and on. We are all surrounded with our parents, with our grandparents, sometimes with friends who are suffering from all of these conditions. Turns out if you reach the age of 65, close to 70% of the population has at least one of these conditions. Now think about the incredible burden. And this burden is not only in terms of health-wise, it's a burden on their family, it's a burden on society, it's a burden on the quality of life that these people experiences. Now, it turns out that all of these diseases that I mentioned are what we call the chronic disease of aging, because age is the major risk factor. Think about cholesterol. You have a lot of patients, as I suspect. I suspect a good fraction of them are on statins to lower their cholesterol. And this is one of the great success of modern medicine, frankly. And if you think about this, the role of aging in comparison to your cholesterol, everyone recognizes your high cholesterol is a risk factor for heart disease, but it turns out that your age is 7 times more important. Now, in the past, people used to think, well, age is not something that we can control or we can really modulate, but it turns out that this was wrong. And this is the promise of the field, because aging is the biggest risk factor for all of these diseases. And when I mean aging, aging pathways. That means if you intervene directly in aging pathways, either with interventions or with drugs, we can modulate all of these diseases together. And that's the promise. The promise is really increasing health span, the healthy years of life, and then allowing people to really reach their life and live their life to the maximum. That's really is the promise of this field. So really aging in a much more graceful way that many of us do.
And since we mentioned human rights, in 1948, health was declared a human right. And the interesting part of that is that even though it's quite a while ago, the definition of health was really nicely put. So it wasn't just keeping disease away or keeping disorders at bay, but it was really about each individual obtaining and reaching the best possible state of health that they can reach. And this was in 1948. So
that's amazing. That was incredible, because this is really still what animates you.
Absolutely.
As the idea of living your life to the fullest. We only have one life. It's an incredible gift. I think all of us recognize this. Most of the time, it can be difficult sometimes. Most of the time, it can be an incredible gift. And so why not make the most of what you have been given and really live it to the fullest? And that's health is the foundation of all of this. If you're not healthy, frankly, it's going to really alter the way you're looking at your life.
Erik, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise and knowledge in the field of longevity and healthy aging.
Thank you. I'll come again anytime. Just let me know.
And for our listeners, please stay tuned. In 2 weeks' time, we'll have more fascinating experts joining our podcast, The Longevity Code by Longevity Center Switzerland. Looking forward.